All right, guys, this is a bit of a different one. So I wasn't at AHR, but if you guys have followed along with HVAC Know-It-All on like social media and stuff, you would have seen Ben Reed down at AHR doing a lot of different booth stuff with different manufacturers. Now, he also recorded a podcast with Tony Mormino, and it was along the lines of sales. Now, Tony's a commercial guy, commercial HVAC. So it was along the lines of selling in commercial HVAC because that's Tony's experience. So Ben heads up as host on this one. I'm just setting it up here in the intro, and he's talking to Tony Mormino live at AHR. So let's get to this one, guys. This is the HVAC Know-It-All podcast. I'm your host, Gary McCready. This podcast is sponsored by Cool Air Products, Master, Cintas, and SupplyHouse.com. Go to the show notes and click on the links to check these guys out.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Reed, and I am here with Mr. Tony Mormino, and I am with the wonderful, I guess you can't see it here, but HVAC Know-It-All. So Gary couldn't make it this year. He sent me instead another fellow Canadian. As a part of the requirements to work with Gary, I had to retain my beard, trim it to a very specific length, but it was worth it. I have enjoyed my time so far here down at AHR 2025. Have you liked it, Tony?
I loved it. This is like a content creator's paradise, so it's a lot of fun. I think one of the busiest ones I've ever been to.
It's been a very energetic year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. And thanks for having me on the podcast, too. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Thanks for coming. It is end of the day 3. So I'm surprised we still have our voices.
I still have gas in the tank, which is surprising, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's use that gas to talk about something important, something that a lot of techs struggle with, which is sales.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk specifically about sales of commercial equipment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that, Tony, maybe you can fill the audience in a little bit on your background about, like, where you came from and what you specialize in.
Yeah, sure. So I got introduced to the HVAC community through my dad, Joe Mormino, shout out, who was a residential installer, and went on a couple job sites with him. And he really, my dad came from the generation where if you're able to go to college, you go to college, right? Like that's and God bless him, he wanted me to do that. So I ended up going to college, got an engineering degree, but I always was like being pulled towards HVAC. And I also was always pulled towards sales for some reason.
Oh, just weird. Like,
yeah,
most engineers do not gravitate towards sales.
Totally. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, like my experience with that. And it was kind of frowned upon in the engineering community. Like, you're going to waste your engineering degree and go into sales. But I had grown up kind of waiting tables and being on the front of the house. I worked in the back of the house of restaurants too.
Used to working with people.
Yep. Used to work with people. And I thought, well, sales will be fun. But at the time, there was no there was this thing called the World Wide Web when I was going in college. So there wasn't any information on there.
Was this before the .com bubble or after?
Way before.
Okay.
We didn't even know what the .com was. I mean, it was like, what does www mean? What do you type that in for? So there was no information out there. And I happened to stumble upon a seminar that one of the big manufacturers was doing. And they talked about this career called a sales engineer. And I was like, oh, okay.
Marrying my two loves.
So I, and HVAC, which was a love from my dad. And then I sat there and I'm like, this is for me. This is what I want to do. So anyway, that's how I got into the field. That's my background. I would say one of the things I've learned, I've talked about sales in general, is anybody could do sales. Like, I had this misconception that it was the guy who's real boisterous and he's partying all the time with people and that, and there are salesmen who do well by doing that. I've never been that type of salesperson. I'm more of a nerdy, can I come by and educate your new engineers on psychometric?
But there's a stereotype that most people are used to that, and there's a gap between what most people who are techs, who are fixers, and then those, at least from what I hear, the white shirts. That's in the residential side. I get a lot of the home performance contractors that I work with. They do not like the white shirts because they come in and they oftentimes sell things that the customer doesn't need.
Yep.
But because they are convincing enough, and the homeowner doesn't know any better.
Right.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot of that from my father. And of course, I'm in the commercial side is my experience, but I watched my father, he would almost not charge enough. And I'd be like, Dad, you got to get paid for because he was such a nice guy. He wanted to help people and he would never that I knew of sell anything that they didn't need. But yeah, I have a little bit of a disdain for that too. And I see some things on social media that makes me cringe because they're talking about, not being very honest with customers. So I could tell you in the commercial world, that is extremely rare. A lot of the commercial folks that I've worked with, I would say 98% of them because our business is like foundational on relationships.
Yep.
Okay. Like I was a sales engineer in Jacksonville for 20 years. It was the same, 40 people I called on for those 20 years. Right. So the process of building your relationship will quickly vet out the people who are not honest and not good at their job.
But also, just again, kind of creating a juxtaposition between the residential and the commercial side, I think one of the reasons why the relationships are so much more important there, rather they end up having such a bigger impact, is because the scale of those projects means that there's a lot more, I guess, accountability and liability that's attached to the end-to-end process of putting equipment into a building. Like
Absolutely.
in residential, at least from what I've seen, is that a lot of people can just get in, toss in a box, and get out. And the homeowner, as long as it's blowing hot or cold air, they're okay with it. But in commercial, there's a lot of metrics. There's a lot of investment that people are measuring. And so if you don't actually have if you don't understand that it's going to be a long-term relationship in commercial, then you're not going to last very long.
Not at all. And I'm glad you brought this up, because there is a huge responsibility, because a lot of times the design engineers rely on their rep as the go-to expert on things. And if you're deceiving and you steer them in a way that's not good for them, but good for you, it could cost them their business. Like it's a major, major deal. You're looking at this facility here. I don't know how many square foot we are, but this has got to be, 10,000 tons of air conditioning in this facility. And, it can make or break a company, either a contractor, a design engineer, general contractor, and it really has a ripple effect. So, my goal was always to be the consultant to the consultant. My favorite call was, Tony, we got this job. We want to do A, B, and C on this job. What do you got? And I knew it wasn't a good fit for me. And I tell them, you know what? If you use my product, we could do it. We're way overkill. You're going to get embarrassed on price. It's over-engineered. But here's who to call. And I would always give them a list of people who are reputable. Like, these guys are my competition. I hate steering you there, but they do have a product that would fit well with that. That's the best call you can get, because it totally builds trust and faith in your relationship. You know what I'm saying?
Well, because you're providing value, not products.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's a big shift.
Yeah.
If you're a technician that's, I guess, hasn't gone into the sales world and find it a bit kind of trepidatious, it's a mindset shift where, yes, a lot of the manufacturer training might be like, you're supposed to sell this product or that product, but you can get very comfortable having a lot of very pleasant, actually quite rewarding interactions if you shift away from believing that you're selling a device or really a service, and you're just solve somebody's problems, because we're all humans who want to connect to each other. It's a shift in the perspective of what a sales role is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. When you look at it for, I did a post a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember all the points, but they were brilliant, trust me, of a successful account. We used to call them sales engineers. We now call them account executives. I'm not sure why the shift, maybe to get the word sales out of it. But one of the keys of a successful account executive, when you look across our family of brands and in our company, is they're out to help the customer become more successful.
Yeah.
How can I make the customer become more successful? You give away training, you give away this, you email them stuff that's useful for them. You know when to back off when you're not the right fit, and you know when to fight when you're the right fit. It took me a lot of years to learn that, because I'm not a big, if the contractor and engineer want to go a certain way, I didn't want to mess them up. But there was a few times I can remember which were pivotal in my career. I was like, look, I don't fight you guys a lot. You're making a huge mistake. Go see their factory. Go see my company's factory. And this is for, especially with niche products that the engineers and contractors aren't familiar with. You might see a pretty submittal, and I can make a submittal look pretty, but it doesn't mean I can build that unit right. I've been in the room before where they came back and said, yeah, you were right. You should listen to you. But anyway, yeah. So,
but yeah, that whole, if you see something, say something, if you have that technical role of supporting that buying process. And I know that myself, Actually, I'm going to be honest, I hate sales. It's something I'm very uncomfortable with. I used to be way more uncomfortable and standoffish about ever doing things related to sales. I've gotten a lot better now, because I'm understanding that it's not a process of selling something that people may or may not need. It's about solving a problem. But you have, especially if you're technical and you're supporting the sales process, it is a responsibility that you have to make sure that everybody is informed, and sometimes they have biases that might need to be overcome, and you might be the guy to do that. And so stepping out of your comfort zone, Do you have any tips for
Yeah.
somebody who's in that uncomfortable situation and may, potentially face blowback, like for stepping out and saying something about the situation because they know that product isn't going to work in that particular plant or on that rooftop
Sure.
that's being installed?
I mean, the best thing you could speak from is your experience, right? No one could argue with your experience. And if they trust you, then they trust you're telling them the truth. But, speak from your experience. Like, I know you want to go with that. That's cool. The product I'm giving you, here's why you want to go with this product or a similar one. Because sometimes they might be looking at something that's just not going to, you're like, dude, that's not going to work. You're going to have to upgrade that over time. You don't have to buy mine, but you want to be in this category of product. You get what I'm saying? So there's that. Like,
Here's your guardrails.
Exactly. You're sharing your experience there. The other thing is to, I don't know where I heard this, but someone said, don't try to convince people, but speak with conviction. And that small, it sounds like a small little nuance, but it's huge. Like, look, if you don't want to buy it, that's fine. But let me tell you what my experience is. Here's what, I've dealt with in the past and yada, yada, yada. And the other thing I would say when we're talking about like sales in general is I learned long ago, any personality could be in sales. And I heard this, somebody equated this to comedians, and I'm totally going to date myself because I don't know who any of the new comedians are, but like Bob Newhart, Stephen Wright were really dry. Yeah, exactly. They were really dry comedians if you look them up, but they were hilarious. But then you had like the rambunctious, the boisterous ones like Eddie Murphy and stuff like that who were hilarious, but a different style. But they were both very successful. The point is, like, you could be a nerdy engineer like me and be good at sales, or you could be like, I was never a good taking contractors out for beers and golfing and doing this kind of stuff. I wasn't.
Because that's the stereotype. And
that's the stereotype.
And that's what's popularized. That's what everybody sees. And so there aren't enough examples of people demonstrating that if you're your authentic self and figure out what your strengths are, that if you bring that to the table, that's probably going to be your best sales asset.
100%. Self-awareness is huge in all aspects of any career, I think. And, I know
all life.
And I know the things I'm good at, and I stick with those, and trying to make myself better at something that's just not my shtick. It's a recipe for burnout, I think.
Yeah. Well, learning new things is great, but it's knowing when to back off. And especially in commercial, you're part of a team. You are oftentimes a part of a buying process that has a buying committee.
Yeah.
And so there are, sometimes between 3 and 15 people that are a part of making a decision. And so being aware of not just yourself, but also the other people that are there, and kind of trying to navigate like, okay, here's my corner, here's where I can provide value. But then there's these other guys here, so that if I'm not comfortable with this, either I can go to my own, manufacturer support for additional help on this, so I don't have to speak out of my ass, or there's somebody else here as a part of this process that I can talk to just get everything going so much faster and smoother.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm a little curious. That was one of the questions I had kind of coming into this is, again, for the uninitiated to kind of understand that if you're getting into that sales process and commercial, I have a lot of background in like doing market research and understanding some of the processes around why people make decisions and buy products. And so that term that I used, buying committee, is that something that you've come across often in your work and you can speak to?
I don't have a lot of experience with that, actually. Most of the buying decisions were by, at the end of the day, the mechanical contractor who was awarded the bid.
Yeah.
And if we've done our job right, we're in a position where the job's kind of sold because it's lined up for our products and our specialties ahead of time. But there are some where I guess committees were involved in that.
But sure. Okay, so it's not an official committee. It's more of a symbolic one. So I'll just
I see.
Maybe I'll just put some examples. Like there's an influencer. So like if you talk to let's say a maintenance technician, they're not going to be making the purchasing decision. But they will have some input in the scenario. And
right.
So,
and maybe the engineer and the contract. I get it.
Yeah. Totally. And so there's influencers, there's the actual decision maker, and then there's a couple other roles kind of scattered throughout there. So maybe in your own words, when you're kind of dealing with commercial sales, typically, are there a few different types of people or personas that you interact with where you need to kind of give them different information as a part of your sales process?
100%. Yeah. So the engineer has different concerns than the maintenance guy, than the building owner, and then the contractor. And I guess...
And you need to switch hats through the process.
Yeah. So you need to switch hats and, try to find out what their pain points are and address those pain points. Like the maintenance guy wants it something legit that's going to last, that he can maintain. And the engineer may be more concerned with energy efficiency, and the building owner may be concerned with sustainability. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You gotta wear a bunch of different hats.
Yeah, and kind of like I think that Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People many years ago. And like, it's again, talking about simple concepts that are hard to master. The whole, like, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, like try to listen before you are trying to deliver your own opinions to the situation.
Empathy comes to mind.
Yeah, much simpler. So you take an education-based approach to sales, right?
Yeah.
But you give that a particular name, and what does that look like for your process?
I don't know that I have a name for it, but I definitely have been always more of the educator type to build a relationship. And I have found that the best marketing you can do or the best brand building you could do is help someone on their journey from point A to point B to whether they're doing. There's a value, I call that a value gap, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to bring value, especially if you're new to sales or new to calling on an engineering firm. The last thing you're going to do is roll in there and ask for a spec or a sale or something like that. You're going to say, hey man, I'm new here. I'd love to meet your team. Here's a suite of, trainings I could offer, and I'd love to come do that for you.
Start with humility. Yep.
Yeah. Cause you got to earn it. Nothing's going to be given to you. Sales is not, commercial HVAC sales is not for sissies. I mean, it could be a brutal job. It's very difficult. You could work on a job for a year and lose it and get paid nothing.
Whoa.
So it's not always an easy job. Now, it is very rewarding. It's probably the next best thing to owning your own business in terms of income and freedom and stuff like that. So if you're entrepreneurial and don't want to own your own business, that's a good way to make good money. So
yeah, good money, but it has its own risk profile. Like
100%.
Like the whole working on a project for, I know a couple of sales engineers where I meet them after a deal fell through, and they're just completely deflated for like almost a full week, like almost into a mini depression. So it doesn't happen often, but
that never
comes
gets
with the
easier.
job. Yeah.
We tell people when they're new, look, what you're feeling now, in 30 years, you'll be feeling the same thing if that happens again, but you just got to deal with it, and you got to deal with until the point where you don't. And I got to a point in my career where I was kind of burned out. I was like, I need to do something different. And, unfortunately I waited too long to do something different because I was stuck in fear. Like I didn't want to make a change because it's scary to make a change in a career, especially when you're a little older in your life. I was 45 when I started 47-ish when I started a new career in what I do now, which is more of online training and marketing and stuff like that. So, which I enjoy, and I'm glad I'm not in sales anymore. But
yeah. So back to the kind of commercial equipment sales. What category of equipment did you usually deal with in your field of work?
Yeah, so I mostly dealt with applied equipment, which is non-cataloged equipment, large chillers, custom air handlers, built-up air handling units, things like that, pumps, cooling towers, some cataloged equipment too, but that's primarily what I dealt with. Chill water DX type equipment.
And the types of, buildings or customers that would be purchasing those were
pretty much all over the place. Anything from a strip mall to I think the largest job I did was a 15,000 ton district cooling plant with centrifugal chillers. It's a lot of fun to get an order of 5 big units that are all the same. It's super easy to enter the order, but yeah, so anything from schools, office buildings, you name it, I've probably had my hand in one of those types of applications.
Okay. And then maybe just for the people that aren't familiar, like what does that process look like from start to finish? Because sometimes there might be RFPs involved, but maybe if you could take people through that typical journey.
Sure. Yeah. So it all starts with the mechanical engineer, at least in terms of in my experience. So you want to really build relationships with the local mechanical engineers. The best call you can get is, hey, we just got this job. It's a hospital. What do you think about this? Can we work together on a couple options and budgets? Then you're kind of in the project. You're in the beginning stages of the project. The consultant's going to call the people who are going to look out for them. They don't want to call a guy who's got, one solution for every project because that's the only solution he sells. That's not the guy they're going to typically call. So you got to look at it from that standpoint. So you build a relationship with the engineer as the plans develop and the owner's okay with the direction in terms of the product they're going to specify. Let's say it's manufacturer A, to keep it neutral, right? And I rep that product. They're going to specify to manufacturer A. The contractor goes out to bid. The plans and specifications go out to bid. 5 mechanical contractors bid it. Mechanical contractor B gets the job and he buys out the job. Now he may buy my equipment, which is more likely than not because I'm on the plans. So everything's based on my equipment. So if the price is reasonable and it's not out in Left Park, I'll probably get that job. And then, so I would sell the job to the contractor. That's where the sales part comes in to try to close the order. Then you get the order and then you got to go through the submittal process, which means you're basically creating a small book, telling them what they're getting. They approve the submittals, the engineer does, and then you order the equipment, ship it. And then if you start it up and there's no issues, you're done with the project. sometimes there's issues that last years because we were dealing with big mechanical projects. So, yeah, so that's basically the process.